The people have spoken. They have chosen the best 10 Scotch whisky distilleries. Well, in fact, they have crowdsourced the top 40 Scotch distilleries. So let's give Jeff's judgment on what you have chosen and the distilleries I put forward as my top 10. Welcome back to Jeff Whisky. I'm Jeff, this is Whisky, let's crack on. Jeff Whisky. So Dramface, possibly the best whisky reviewing content website out there, have put together a crowdsourced list of Scotch distilleries taken from over 1,000 whisky lovers, and as they've done all the hard work for me, I'm going to dive in and give my thoughts. For those seeing one of these videos for the first time, I'm Jeff, a whisky reviewer in a shirt and shades, chatting whisky and slapping bottles. Strange, I know. If you've enjoyed this, do consider subscribing, supporting, but with that, let's crack on. So, with total transparency, as some people already deduced, I am one of the many writers on Dramface, and you can probably tell which one I am from the minimal content I submit, daft jokes and pretty shoddy photography. But apart from me bringing the standard down, do check out the site, the other writers are amazing, the podcast is hilarious, and they're just putting out great whisky stuff for whisky lovers from whisky lovers. Down in the description I'll link to the top 40 which they keep up to date following further responses, and you can vote in there now if you already haven't. But that's enough about them, time to pillage their hard work for my own content. Jumping off with the dropouts from the latest update, Glengoyne, Bladnoch, Belvenny, Aberlour, they've all been kicked out of the top 40, which to me all seem quite a surprise. Judging from social media, Glengoyne seemed to be one of the most visited Scotch distilleries, so I'd think people would have a great connection with them. Or maybe the Goose is now just too overpriced and out of touch. And Belvenny has some solid bottles and are highly accessible, which makes it even more surprising that they've not even scraped into the top 40 at the moment. Either way, looking through, Glendronach definitely seems to have slipped from the limelight in the short space I've been a whisky nerd. They're sat at number 26, and when I first started it felt like they're the sherry bomb bottles which you just had to grab. You've then got Lagavulin at 22 and Talisker at 24. I think both are victims of overpricing, or more due to just how large and public their price increase has been. Lagavulin 16 is such a pure staple, and the fact that it's almost become viewed as overpriced and it's always constantly on sale just as a way to shift the bottles has really damaged how people view the distillery as a whole. And the less said about the Talisker 18 price increase the better. Loch Lomond at number 16, I certainly think this is the Aqvavitae effect. Roy really shined on this distillery and they seem to have gone strength to strength, putting out some amazing bottles and just engaging with the whisky community. Possibly the biggest shock is Craigellachie at number 14. While it's climbed up a lot since the last update, it seems to be such a well-loved and there's such a devoted fan base of that oily, dirty liquid.
These are great. The dirtier the better.
Then as you scroll up, there's a three-way Islay run missing out of the top 10. Kilchoman is well deserved at the 13th spot, great whisky and still new in the grand scheme of things. Then beaten by one of my favourites, Laphroaig. While they have so many bangers, I think their 10-year-old core bottle and other of their cheaper core releases have let them down. And I also don't want to talk about their subtle branding changes.
Don't get me started.
Then you got Ardbeg at 11. The cult has been conquered, probably smoked out by the hundreds of special releases diluting their brand. Granted, number 11 is still very high, and out of all the Scotch distilleries... Wait, how many are there? ...143 according to Wikipedia, so let's take that with a pinch of salt. 11 out of just under 150. It's not bad going. So let's get to the top 10. There's no real shocks here. Tobermory at number 8. And for me, I think that's certainly being carried by the amazing Leejay bottles they put out. Bunaharbin and Bruichladdich. In my books, they're slightly too high up, but you can't argue with the people. You then got one of the hottest distilleries at the moment, Ardnamurchan at number 2. Now, I've never had a bad Ardnamurchan. I believe all of them I've tried have been good. In fact, I'm just going to check my little spreadsheet. Yeah, so the lowest score for one is a 2022 cask strength bottle, which is 6.4 out of 10. So that still hits the good whiskey tier. It would be great to be like Hipster and say, oh, they're too new, they're too overhyped, but people love it for a reason.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
And then that brings us to number 1, no shock to anyone, Springbank.
Say what?
With their marketing-less marketing, which is still marketing, they are still the enthusiast top choice. Even if you struggle to get your hands on an actual bottle, I think there's a lot of admiration of what they're doing. It also helps that this distillery also includes the always interesting triple distilled Hazelburn and that fantastic bottles of just like red diesel that is Longrow. For me, out of the 3, Longrow beats Springbank by a hefty chunk, but that's for another video. Really, I could chat about these results and dive through it all for ages, but do go along, get involved if you haven't already, join in the comments over there. I'll also include some links to some of my favourite articles on there just to give a flavour of the gold they're turning out. Don't worry, none of them will be from me. But now, time to stop being a sniper wolf and start giving my own list to this content. Here are my top 10 Scotch distilleries. So coming in at number 10, Craigellachie. While I've had a couple of indie releases from them which wasn't amazing, overall the oily goodness is hard to beat at a pretty fair price point. I remember I had a Heroes and Heretics bottle which was just so over sulphured and bitter. But compare that to the brilliant Craigellachie 13 in their core range. Their Craigellachie 17 is pretty amazing, if not quite pricey. So it well deserves my number 10 spot. Number 9, Tomintoul. Tomintoul? You don't come to this channel for pronunciation. So I've got a soft spot for the Gentle Dram. While they don't have that hardcore fan base, all their whiskies I've tried have been pretty delightful and overall easygoing. The 16 is pretty wonderful, even at the low ABV, it just carries these flavours through. Their cigar malt is good and shows like a bit more ABV, there's a bit more life to it. They've got a peaty tang release, which is interesting. And this distillery produces the brilliant and massively underrated bottles of Old Ballantrae. Make sure you check them out.
You must trust me on this.
Number 8, Ardnamurchan. Yep, I'm no hipster whiskey purist. Not a hate mate, but well and truly on the bandwagon for this distillery. Well, I think by my dress sense, I'm pretty hipster.
There's nothing more pathetic than an aging hipster.
They are connecting with the whiskey community, and near everything that comes out is solid. Now, I'm not saying every bottle is perfect, but that salty craft presented passion really gives credit to this distillery. So while it's not my number 2, it certainly deserves a high spot. Number 7, Ardbeg. Yes, I am still in the cult of Ardbeg, though if you asked me 3 years ago, this could have easily been in my top 3. They're great looking bottles with great peaty liquid inside. I'm always impressed by their 10-year-old release, which managed to balance these hefty peat notes with fresh green apples, and it always throws me off in a blind taste. Like others, I felt burned out by their churn of special releases that, in truth, are beyond my spending reach. But from the Oogie to the Beastie, it's just hard to overlook them. Number 6, Tobermory. Leejay! Now firstly, the 2 I think Tobermorys I have tried were fine. Not fine enough to make notes in my spreadsheet, but not bad enough to either.
Meh. What do you mean, meh?
However, their peated releases of Leejay is another story. From their amazing and way underpriced Rioja cask bottle, to their reliable punchy 10-year-old, and all the way to the luxuriously deep 18-year-old release, everything is great. They have that peat that's just like so different to others, and in a way it just touches your soul. Maybe I should have put this higher than 6. Number 5, Glenlivet. I know what you're thinking, a basic distillery, a mass-produced entry whiskey for a lot of folk. Yep, and I stand by it. Glenlivet 15 was the whiskey where flavours truly clicked for me, and for that alone it's going to get a high place. I returned to that hazelnut delight glass after glass. The Glenlivet 12 is friendly and fruity. Sure, the Founder's Reserve is pretty awful, and if you get a chance to try the illicit still or licensed dram, you can see how amazing the whiskey can be at a higher strength. Looking around, licensed dram at 48% and 12 years old age statement. It's even currently on sale on Master Malt for 40 quid. So that's a craft presented age statement whiskey at a very, very good price. Number 4, Lagavulin.
Seems like a good idea.
Yes, Parks and Rec is an all-time favourite easy watch show of mine, and Nick Offerman is a delight whether he is playing a canoe carving hater of people or like a tear-inducing zombie apocalypse survivor. But beyond his face and marketing, Lagavulin do a lot of great stuff, even if they have taken a few very big missteps lately. The 16-year-old bottle is a staple. I wish I could afford to replace it. Their 8-year-old punches well above the 8 statement, and every single dram I have tried, whether it is with a bottle in hand or in a blind tasting, has always scored a 7 or above. For me, it's always a very good whiskey. There's a special release which I tried on a V-pub, I think it was, which on the label there's like a Phoenix or some fancy special bottle, and I can still remember that taste of apple orchards on fire.
This is Diageo's Lagavulin 12 2022 special release. Lagavulin 12 cask strength.
Fantastic stuff. Number 3, Glasgow Distillery. Now, this pains me that it's not in the crowdsourced top 40. However, by the time I finish filming, editing and all that nonsense, it may have made it, as it's now gaining a lot of traction. Their blended malt bottle, Malt Riot, is a melon bomb delight. From their light and fruity triple distilled to their rich and smoky peated releases, they've kind of got it all covered. Their team are super passionate and engaged with the whiskey world, and with their unique finishes dropping in natural presentation, I'm sure it's a distillery that's gonna be on everyone's radar. Also, you can't look past how they went from 50cl size bottles to begin with to jumping to the standard 70cl without increasing the price. I'm generally convincing myself to buy another bottle now. Number 2, Laphroaig. Yes, supposedly the most divisive whiskey is coming at my number 2, and truth is, I think I've based this off maybe 2 bottles. One, their quarter cask release, which for the price provides this raw, clean, peated delight, which I've not found something that compares to it. And then there's the 10-year-old Sherry Oak release, which that was my whiskey of the year a couple years back now. Laphroaig 10 Sherry Oak finish.
Nothing's changed.
An absolute delight of a whiskey, and lately I'm starting to really connect with their lore, which in truth made me question my purchase to begin with. But as it goes down, it's definitely becoming more, I don't know, maybe not Laphroaig-y, but more fruity, slightly smoky, rich, rounded, herbaceous.
Oh, you're real good with words, ain't you?
Other things. I am in truth starting to question this number 2 spot, as I've seen photos of their packaging changes and my peat passion has slightly been fading as the temperatures start to rise. But I've got it noted down at this spot and it's in pencil, so too late to change it. Then of course, to milk this further, some honourable mentions have to go to Kilchoman, Glenmorangie, Torabhaig and Kingsbarn. But to the shock of no one, my number 1, Glengyle. No, not Springbank, but the highly superior sister, brother, cousin, whatever distillery that puts out the amazing Kilkerran whiskey.
That's a bold claim.
Out of the 6 different bottles I've tried, with one of them being in a blind tasting, the lowest score is a 7.8 out of 10, with the highest being my number 1 whiskey so far. The Kilkerran 8 Port Cask, currently sitting at an amazing 9.3 out of 10. A near perfect whiskey. Wow, I've recorded 45 minutes of this ramble, so it's going to be a bit of a beast to edit. I'm sure their top 40 will probably change by the time I get this out. But thank you for watching and sticking around. A huge special thanks to Mitch and the wonderful Bottle Slap Club. If you've enjoyed this, slap the like. If you've hated it, a dislike. Feel free to argue with me in the comments. And all that's left to say is all the best. And cheers to the next one.